Hi, I'm Joe Ellison, and I'm here to read a fourth excerpt from my latest Snarkey Putts Paranormal Attorneys at Law book, Snarkey Putts number 3, The Case of the Canine's Curse. In this excerpt, we join our redoubtable legal pair, Snarkey and Putts, as they have a luncheon, a business luncheon, with a very important prospective client, the wolf-like Eliot Babington, at a very exclusive steakhouse. The steaks are served. Let's dig in with Snarkey and Putts. The crystal stemware shivered atop the white linen tablecloth as Eliot Babington slashed a ragged strip from his porterhouse steak. He impaled the bloody slab of meat on his fork and held it up for Snarkey and Putts to see from across the table. Blood red, cold in the center, that's how I like it, Babington lusted, a spot of drool dripping from his lips, tincturing his chin. The meat seemed to wriggle on the fork. Babington relished the motion, then plunged it into his mouth. He chewed, grinning. Putt's heart trembled. He tried to keep it calm. It frightened him. What if Eliot saw his beating heart? What if he pounced on it? What if he tore the living muscle from Putt's chest and devoured it like a piece of steak? Fortunately, the folds of Putt's body fat muffled his heart's pounding, or so Putts hoped. He stole a glance at Snarkey. His colleague's eyes were fixed on Eliot, watching him chew, watching the grinding of his jaw, the licking of his lips, watching him the way an actor watches from off stage, waiting for his cue, waiting to make his entrance, waiting with his lines all ready. That's how I like it, too, Snarkey recited. He mimicked Eliot's bloodlust and tore into a comparable slab of red flesh, chewing it, grinding its sinews between his teeth without remorse. Eliot's knife and hand moved as one, tearing another raw chunk of beef from the porterhouse's bone. I love meat on the bone, he growled. He lifted the steer's near naked lumbar vertebra in his hand. Rip it off with your teeth. He followed his own recommendation and gulped down a mouthful. It's a primal experience, makes you one with nature. He trained his eyes on Snarkey's, grinning through the remnants of rent flesh stuck between his incisors. Ever eaten fresh kill, Jack, while the blood's still warm? No, Snarkey's eyes fluttered for the space of an ad-lib. No, I haven't, but I've always wanted to. There's nothing like it. Eliot hunched over his last shreds of porterhouse. Nothing like it at all. This steak is good, very good, but warm venison in your belly, you stalk it, you kill it, you eat it warm with life. You make that life your own. Nothing satisfies like that. I'll bet, Snarkey hacked at his steak. Putts looked down at the knife and fork in his hands, at the huge, untouched porterhouse on his plate, at the plate itself, thick, heavy, white, oval, porcelain. He ran his eyes in an outward spiral from the steak, over the peas and creamed spinach and baked potato, over the stemware and the salad dish, onward to the surrounding tables, to the waiter's station, to the dark paneling of the steakhouse walls and the brass chandelier looming overhead. Putt's eyes dropped to one table, then bounced to another and another. The kaleidoscope of moving diners, the alternating actions of fork and knife and jaw held him in thrall. Cut, bite, chew, cut, bite, chew. Putts tried to synchronize his movements with their tempo, but some nagging thought, discoordinated him. What if some of the diners were wolves, like Eliot? What if all of them were? What if Snarkey was one of them? Putts slipped. His knife and fork clashed together. Eliot's ears snapped at the noise. The wolfman stared at Putts, blood and juice and grease shining on his lips. "What's the matter, Putts?" His glance scorned Putts' pristine porterhouse. "Not hungry? Or are you one of those vegetable eaters?" "Come on, Putts," Snarkey urged between chews. "The meat's great." He lifted his pecuniary nose into the air, sampled the atmosphere, suctioned in the air heavy with the odor of money. "You don't get this every day." Eliot lowered his head. He spoke out of the side of his mouth. "Too rich for your blood, Putts?" Putts took the question as a threat. He parried it with a thrust of his steak knife to mid-porterhouse. "No," he shook his jowls. It's great." Putts nodded to Eliot, but found himself unable to look the man, if you could call him that, straight in the eye. Putts' head tilted a little off-center. He dropped his eyes to his plate and concentrated on sawing his steak, slicing little hash-sized specks away from the fat. "Just great." "What are you doing?" Eliot foamed, a chat of beef hanging from the corner of his mouth. "You're missing the best part. You're cutting off the fat." Snarky's warning nudge lost itself in Putts' well-cushioned flank. He went verbal. "It is the best Putts. It is the best part, Putts. The fat's got all the flavor." "Sweet," Eliot masticated. Putts managed to swallow a hunk of meat and gristle. It bit back at him as he chewed. He stretched his neck to force it down. "That's how to do it," Snarkey encouraged. Eliot grunted. Putts made up with effort what he lacked in style, hacking and chewing, hacking and chewing. Eliot and Snarkey tucked into flesh and bone, grunting and growling at irregular intervals. Putts found himself thinking of the professor and Judge Levine and Morton Menninger, of the other ghosts and spirits he had encountered, his friends. He borrowed a grunt and directed it at them. They were business friends at best. He'd been calling out to them for weeks with no response. Fat lot of good they were, badgering him when they wanted something, but let him put out a cry for help, and where were they? Were they anywhere at all? Putts couldn't help but wonder. What if Snarkey had the right idea about them? Use them, but don't believe in them. Don't waste time thinking they're real. Don't let yourself get as crazy as your clients. Putts looked along the bone of his porterhouse. It pointed at Snarkey. Snarkey ate with all of Eliot's relish and none of Putts' fear. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was nothing to be afraid of. Maybe Eliot was nothing but a conventional, well-paying asshole who happened to like eating raw, fresh-killed meat. "You've got to hand it to Putts, Eliot." Snarkey scraped the last bits of meat from his bone with the tines of his fork. "He got the old lady out without having to go to court. I don't know what he told her, but making him go along with the constable was a good idea. I'm glad I thought of it." Eliot cracked a splinter of bone between his teeth. "You're glad to spend my money." "So it cost a little extra in legal fees," Snarkey admitted. "But look at the bright side. We didn't have to wait for the entry date or the hearing date or any other of that summary process rigmarole. Tenant has a right to a trial by jury, you know. Putts here," he slapped Putts on the shoulder, "he cut through all that. For a couple of $100 he saved you thousands in fees." Eliot held his bone in two hands and gnawed along the length of it. "It's the time, not the money." He licked the steer's vertebra with a long, rough tongue. "You saved me time, Putts." He showed his teeth. "You did well." To Putts, it felt like a reprieve. Still, a new thought shivered down his spine. I wonder what happened to her." "Who?" Eliot snarled. "The Brono woman." Eliot licked the grease from his fingers, then wiped them on the tablecloth, as if stropping a razor. "You sound like my sister. Who cares what happened to her? She's gone. That's all I wanted. That's all I care about." He scoured his mouth with his napkin and threw it onto the plate. "Waiter!" A white-jacketed waiter appeared off Eliot's elbow. "Take the plates away," Eliot commanded. "Bring us some coffee. See that we aren't disturbed." "Would you prefer to use a private room?" Eliot growled at the man. "See that we're not disturbed." The waiter disappeared. Putts had only enough time to trade looks with Snarkey before the fire alarm rang. The maitre d' announced that there should be no panic, no shoving, but that everyone should move toward the exits in an orderly fashion. Amid the ensuing panicky babble and shoving and clashing of silverware, Eliot, by the angle of his eyebrows, let Putts and Snarkey know that they were not to move. The three men sat without so much as the twitch of a muscle until the babbling and clashing died away, and the room was empty. Snarkey opened his mouth wide, gurgling like an infant. "I'd never thought of doing that. Not even me." "You don't own this restaurant," Eliot stated. "I do. I own this whole building. I own the block it's built on." The maitre d' himself brought them coffee. "Alphonse," Eliot said through the steam rising from his delicate china cup, "give all the customers their money back, and comp them for a meal next week or whenever. And about our waiter, he questioned me." "I've already fired him, sir." "Good. I expect better training, Alphonse." "I'll see to it, sir." "See that you do." And that's where we end this excerpt. If you want to find out how this meal turns out and what they talk about in its aftermath, I guess you'll just have to buy a copy of Snarkey and Putts number 3, The Case of the Canine's Curse. I hope you do. And if you'd like to, of course, the links to Snarkey and Putts, to all the Snarkey and Putts books, and to my websites and other things about me are right down below in the box, in the discussion box. And if you'd like to hear me read other excerpts from other of my works or from this one, then click on one of the links here on either side of my head. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for coming by, and I hope to see you soon.